The NBA 82-game grind is done, and now the real fun begins. The NBA playoffs are here, and it's time for all the high-stakes drama, clutch moments, and jaw-dropping plays. I can't wait. If you're looking to make the playoffs even more exciting, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered as an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From the play-in games all the way through to the finals, now's the time to back your favorite players and teams as they chase glory. All season long, DraftKings has been the go-to spot for NBA player props, and that does not stop now. Want to make your playoff experience even more intense? Try placing a bet on your favorite player's performance. Will they drop 30 points, 40, or more? It's your call. Ready to place your first bet? Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Lock in your bets. Let's make this playoff run unforgettable. Here's something special for first-timers. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Make it a playoff run to remember with DraftKings. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. We got a quick show for you guys tonight. Obviously, only one game as the first round is winding down. And there was one dynamic that I talked about as we left for Game 5 as Houston blew out the Golden State Warriors. That was Houston's pathway to make this a series, and it was Fred VanVleet and Alperen Sengun, and them being able to go blow for blow as scorers with the Warriors stars, and they did it again tonight. 50 points from those two as the Rockets win 115-107, extend this series to 7, heading back to Houston. And what has been just a wild series with all sorts of twists and turns and different vibes and different trash talk and different dynamics at play. We're going to be breaking that game down from the perspective of both teams. After that, we're going to take a couple questions from you guys in the chat. After that, we're going to head over to Playback. So for those of you guys who haven't been over there yet, we're going to be going right after we finish here live tonight over to Playback. That's where we can be more interactive with you guys. You guys can come on stage with us and ask questions. We can talk about some of the specific details of the series. I also have the ability to put film on the screen, and we can talk about some of the specific dynamics that are taking place in this particular game. So make sure you guys are ready after the show to head over to Playback to hang out for a little bit when we get done here. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. It's also super helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. Jackson's also doing great work on our social media feeds on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Make sure you guys follow us there. And then last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in the YouTube comments so we can keep getting to them throughout the remainder of the postseason. So, Fred VanVleet, as I mentioned, over the course of this season, a jump shot for Fred VanVleet was worth less than a point. It was worth 0.99 points per possession, points per shot. And through the first 3 games of the series, it was a lot of the same kind of thing I've seen from Fred a lot this season, which is he's kind of an important, decision maker for the Rockets in the half court, just kind of getting the ball into the pocket to Sengun and just kind of keeping the ball moving from side to side. He's kind of like the guy who greases the wheels for them on offense at the guard spot as kind of in concert with what Alperen Sengun does in the middle of the floor. In the last 3 games, though, Fred VanVleet is 18 for 27 from 3, which is just unbelievable. 6 for 9 again tonight. That's literally the difference in the game. He goes 3 for 9, which is like in line with the season averages. This is a game Golden State wins. And, I talked after Game 5 that if there was one little kind of playing with fire that Golden State did over the tail end of the series, it was that they lost control of Fred VanVleet. And specifically in Game 4, he got a bunch of wide open looks, really, really good looks. If you guys remember down the stretch of that game, that was when we saw a heavy dose because of foul trouble We saw a heavy dose of like Trace Jackson Davis and Quentin Post trying to guard Alperen Sengun, and the Rockets were setting up Fred VanVleet one pass away, and he was, posting up and drawing that second defender and pitching it out to Fred. Fred was getting clean looks that way. Fred was getting clean looks on offensive rebounds. Fred was getting clean looks on inverted ball screens with Alperen Sengun, and the Warriors have kind of lost control of him. And they've lost control of Sengun, and now it's in a situation where, ultimately what's going to happen in Game 7 is going to come down to the play of the stars. I try to be consistent as much as I can on this show, and you guys know that I'll be critical of stars first and foremost, more than coaches, more than role players. And one of the main reasons why is because the stars are the guys with the superpowers. The coaches can only do so much to set you up for success before it ultimately becomes about the best guys on one team creating advantages versus the best guys on the other team creating advantages. I talked about it in the Pistons-Knicks series, about how every series or every game came down the stretch to a gap in decision-making and shot-making between Jalen Brunson and Cade Cunningham. I talked about how in the Lakers-Timberwolves series, it's come down to whether or not Luka Doncic could beat his one-on-one defender effectively enough to get the defense in rotation so the Lakers could play advantage basketball, because LeBron at age 40 and Austin Reeves as a lesser athlete needs advantages to succeed. Looking at the Nuggets-Clippers series, I've talked about how James Harden and him consistently getting downhill and breaking the defense down is what's necessary for the Clippers to succeed. What did I talk about in Game 6 when the Clippers won? I talked about Nikola Jokic in the third quarter not doing the job offensively, and this has been the case in this series with the Warriors. When Steph has gone unreal offensively as a shot maker, the Warriors have won 31 points in Game 1 on 19 shots. He gets the win. 36 points in Game 3. He gets the win. They managed to win a game in Game 4 with him not playing particularly well, getting a bunch of contributions down the roster. But in the games where Steph has struggled to generate great offense, the team has struggled to win. He goes 6 for 15 for 20 points in Game 2. They lose. He goes 4 for 12 in Game 5 for 13 points, and they lose. Tonight, when he was hitting shots through the first 3 quarters, they were attached. What happened in the fourth quarter when Steph went ice cold? The Rockets pulled away. And again, there are lots of other factors at play. The Warriors missed a lot of clean looks tonight. They struggled a ton on the offensive glass. They struggled with several basic pieces of action that they couldn't defend tonight. There are a lot of things that the Warriors struggled with, but ultimately the one guy in these situations that has the ability to overcome the circumstances and carry his team to where he needs to go is the guy who is initiating offense for you, the guy that is starting everything. And in this game, while Steph did still generate a bunch of advantages, he wasn't able to match it with the shot making in that fourth quarter when his team needed to make a run. It was right there. It was a 2-point game. It was right there for the taking. And they immediately lost control to start that fourth quarter, and they were never able to get back in control of it. And I don't think it's a coincidence that when Fred and Sengun straight up outplay their counterparts, that the Rockets look like the better team. And that's going to be, if you ask me what's going to happen in Game 7, you can talk about Pods making shots. You can talk about Draymond being more impactful offensively, but I really think it's this simple. If you guys can do a better job guarding Fred and you can get Steph back to where he was offensively earlier in the series, you're going to win. It is that simple, in my opinion. I've always kind of focused more on the stars than other elements that come with variability. Coach can only do so much. Role players are by design inconsistent. That's why they're role players. If they were consistently great at all those things, they'd make $30 million. I've heard a lot of talk about the roster. The Warriors roster was number 1 in defense after the All-Star break. If those dudes were all also awesome offensive players, you'd have a $400 million payroll. Like the construct of this team is we have Draymond Green. We have all these ass-kicking athletes that play super hard and play super smart on defense. We get a ton of stops, and Steph lifts us over the top on offense. That is the formula. And this series has absolutely swung on Steph's production starting to tail off and Fred VanVleet's starting to rise to the surface. So like we can talk, I've talked about this a lot last night when we were talking Nuggets Clippers. When you get to this point in the series, there's nothing really fancy about it. You know, like there's no schematic adjustment. There's no thing that Steve Kerr can do. It's your guys versus their guys at this point. No one's surprising anybody. You know what the Sengun Fred VanVleet two-man game is going to look like. You know you're going to see some zone, and guess what? Steph's going to have to get those screens from the top man in the zone, and he's going to have to get downhill and make something happen. And we know he can do it because he's done it at other points in this series. There's a lot of different elements tonight that went Houston's way. I thought Steven Adams was just absolutely unbelievable. He was plus 15 in 31 minutes. Did pretty well at the free throw line, which I think was important with the way that Steve Kerr was deliberately sending him there. He was 9 for 16 at the foul line. Made enough of them to kind of stiff arm the Warriors when they were trying to use the Hack-Adams strategy. The offensive rebounding from him was huge. Sengun just brought enough of that tough shot making in the short to mid range. The defensive work that every Rockets player did on the perimeter, rushing the Warriors' offensive players and forcing them into turnovers. You know, it's the Rockets are playing. They're playing Rockets basketball, and the only way you're going to flip this dynamic is if you can get them to start missing some shots through the strength of your defense, and then on the other end of the floor, if you can get more out of Steph, get more out of Jimmy than what you've been getting at this point in the series. Steph and Jimmy, 7 for 22 from three tonight. A lot of shots were going up, not as many were going in as we know that they're capable of. I want to open it up to the floor here. I'm going to bring Jackson on. We're going to take some questions. We'll stay here for about 10 minutes before we head over to playback. But again, we're going to take some questions here for a little bit, and then we'll move the show over to playback.
Let's do it. First question about Steven Adams. He's obviously presented a ton of problems for the Warriors. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Rockets have won 2 games when he's playing a lot more minutes. Do you think the Warriors counter should be to stay with their smaller lineup, you know, what generally is more effective for them as a team, or play bigger, let a big try to box out Adams while Draymond gets to guard Sengun?
It's a tough question. I actually think the answer to dealing with Steven Adams more has to do with the offensive end of the floor. By the way, as we look at the numbers, Quentin Post in 18 minutes tonight was -9. So having that second big on the floor wasn't exactly doing a ton of positive work in this specific case. I look at it like this. There was a stretch in the third quarter there where Steph was actually doing quite a bit of damage to Steven Adams in space. And that really is the key. If you guys remember dating back to earlier in the series, one of the ways that Steph was having a lot of success was he was attacking up the floor with pace and getting onto Steven Adams in screening action and then immediately attacking and drawing that initial dribble penetration. When they have Steven Adams and Alperen Sengun on the floor, they've got to get those guys in the blender and they got to make them cover ground on the perimeter more and more. I did think that there were several examples tonight, specifically Moses Moody and Brandon Pajemski, which is ironic because the two of them were kind of the more reliable younger players throughout this season. I thought both of them took a few too many shots tonight that were in that like 8-9 seconds on the shot clock where we can at least work to try to get it back to Steph. Because at the end of the day, like those guys just aren't going to hit enough of them for it to be that impactful. And I do think there's something to be said about like Steph putting a shot up is your best chance to generate points, and you need to get it. Like empty the clip. Steph needs to be taking like a lot more shots than he even has been taking in situations like this when they're not going down.
Yeah, I agree. We've gotten a lot of questions about the rotation. Is Jonathan Kuminga the guy? There's a lot of potentially misplaced. Maybe Pat Spencer should get some run talk in the chat right now. I'm not sure I would quite go that far. It's obviously comes down to the stars, like you're saying. But if you were going to make any sort of rotation adjustments for the Warriors, is it more Moses Moody, more Buddy Hield, more Gary Payton, more Quentin Post, Trace Jackson Davis? What would your sort of chess move be?
I was surprised at how quickly Steve Kerr bailed on Buddy Hield. I know he was in some foul trouble, but like Buddy, when he's been on the floor in this series as like a counterpart to Steph's spacing, has actually generated a lot of openings for Steph. Mainly meaning like when Buddy's on the weak side, he's at least being accounted for. And like I thought he had just a little bit of too quick of a hook tonight, especially considering the fact that it wasn't like Brandon Pajemski was hitting everything he was taking and having some sort of profound defensive impact. Again, like I understand the desire to start looking down the roster and being like, what if we get more out of this guy? What if we get more out of that guy? But this is just my personal philosophy, and I know that there are a lot of Warriors fans who disagree with me. I was arguing with a couple Warriors fans before the show. Like there are Warriors fans that are like, Steph's doing his job, it's on everyone else. And I don't disagree that there are obviously some elements down the roster that need to perform better than they've been performing. But I am a firm believer that the superstar is the superpower, and they're the ones that can overcome. And so, yeah, you can lean a little bit more into Buddy Hield than I would. I would lean into Buddy Hield specifically for that counter spacing, having less congestion when Steph is looking to attack into the middle of the floor. One of the things that was missing in tonight's game is it was a lot of threes from Steph. 16 of his 23 attempts from three. If you remember in earlier games in the series, he was really aggressive in the short to mid range, curling around action, taking stuff that was closer to the basket. And I think counter spacing with Steph, playing Buddy alongside him more, I think would be helpful. While you're asking the next question, I'm actually going to go up to Cleaning the Glass and see what Buddy's on-off numbers are in this series, because I think they're pretty strong.
For sure. And I think that's one thing that, I mean, the Rocket zone has obviously thrown the Warriors offense off in a lot of ways. And I think the reason why they deploy it, one of the reasons why they deployed is it's working. It's keeping Steven Adams close to the basket. And it really makes it, never mind get the ball even inside the paint, which they struggled to do. But Steph Curry is not getting any remotely easy looks inside the arc when they're playing zone. It has definitely been very, very effective at its goal, which is to muck it up and then keep the Warriors out of the paint. Another question
really quickly, just so that you guys have the number. Buddy Hield has the best plus minus of any role player in the series. The Warriors are 10.2 points better per 100 possessions with Buddy on versus off. Moving Gary Payton into the starting lineup. Gary Payton in this series, and Jackson and I are both big Gary Payton.
I'm a Gary Payton head, bro.
But the Warriors are 13.2 points worse per 100 possessions in the series when he's on the floor. What I'm seeing with my eyes is the counter spacing. Like Steph and Buddy are consistently on opposite sides of the floor and pulling help defenders away from each other and making life easy for each other. I know he was in foul trouble tonight, but I did think that he was capable of providing more than he did.
Next question. This is not necessarily directed at you because you are critical of Steph today, but why does it feel like Steph gets less criticism than other stars?
I think all of this really comes down to stan behavior. Like I try to be consistent. I openly came on the show after the Lakers game and was like, LeBron was shitty on the defensive glass tonight. And it was a huge part of why they lost the game. Like, I am a big LeBron fan, but like I believe in trying to be consistent with that kind of stuff. I also know that when I'm dealing with the general public, like every Steph fan is going to say he's never done anything wrong. He's the GOAT, and then every LeBron fan is going to be like, why are we never critical of Steph? And it's like, most of the people that I watch that cover the league do a pretty good job of trying to be honest and fair as best as they can. And so I think honestly, it's just about like the echo chambers online. Like, yeah, if you go online and you are scrolling through Twitter and you're watching a bunch of Warriors fans, they're probably not going to be blaming Steph for what happened tonight. And for the record, I don't think Steph's at fault for what's happening tonight or what's happening in this series. It's this simple to me. He's the one guy who can save them. He's the one guy who can save them. Jackson, who was the one guy who could have saved the Lakers in the first round?
I mean, it probably would have been Luka Doncic.
It was Luka. Luka was the one guy who was capable of saving them by being so good on an island one-on-one that everything else trickled down from that. Like I'm a big believer in like looking at Moses Moody and being like, why can't you do more? Is like you're asking someone who's not capable of it.
Right. It's like you're playing meme basketball. Like
exactly.
Why can't this other guy do it? Yeah.
Exactly. And like that's the thing. When we're discussing Steph with respect to Damian Lillard, like, yeah, I'm going to start saying stuff like Steph's a way better defender. He's way better off ball. He's way better at this, and that. But when I'm comparing Steph to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Nikola Jokic and the guys at the top of the league, like, Steph to me was playing at a top 5 level coming into this series. That was the level he was at. I thought he was better than Luka Doncic coming into this playoff run. And like he is again the one guy who can save them. And it really is that simple to me. Really quickly before you ask the next question, 34 possessions of zone for Houston tonight, 0.824 points per possession. I thought it was particularly bad in it was all in the fourth quarter where they fell apart. In the first 3 quarters in 16 possessions, the Warriors got 1.38 points per possession against zone. In the fourth quarter against zone, 18 possessions, only 6 points. So yeah, when we head over to playback here in a little bit, guys, we will watch all 18 of those possessions, and we'll see if there's something obvious that they can get away from. But yeah, the zone definitely picked them to pieces in that fourth quarter. I thought Steph was obviously fatigued too. Like I thought Steph got some good looks. I thought Steph got 3 or 4 very makeable Steph Curry shots in that fourth quarter that he just didn't make. And I think there's a wear and tear factor. I think there's, some of the reality of the variance that comes with really difficult shot making. But yeah, I mean, that's some crazy numbers coming out of the zone defense there.
That is crazy. Let's do one more question and then we'll head over to playback. You talked a lot about the formula for the Warriors in game 7 is one thing on each end. Can they defend the Fred VanVleet Sengun 2-man action better, dramatically better on the defensive end? And can Steph Curry, lift them up with shot making on the offensive end? If you were watching the Warriors and you had to pick one of those two things, that going into game 7, you were like, they're doing this, check it off. They are doing one of those two things. Would you pick what would give them the better chance to win? Being much, much better defensively against that 2-man game, or Steph Curry? I'm not going to say Steph Curry going God mode because that's the obvious, if he gets 50, they're going to win. But if he is a better shot maker than he was tonight.
I think the controllable is defense. I think there's only so much you can cross your fingers and hope in terms of Steph's shot making. Like, and if it's there, they're going to win. But this is the thing. Like they won, and like there is a way to win on Sunday in game 7 without Steph Curry having to score 30 points. And it's you get Sengun and Fred VanVleet under control. Yeah. I think there's a certain amount of there's certain guys that you don't want shooting, and there are certain guys that you're more comfortable with shooting. Like Jabari Smith Jr., got to chase him off the line. Dylan Brooks 0 for 3. Amen Thompson 0 for 1 from 3. Alperen Sengun 0 for 2 from 3. Jalen Green 1 for 6 from 3. Like, they need to be pinching and making sure that specifically Fred is not getting looks. Specifically, Jabari Smith is not getting looks. The other guys, who cares? Like Tari Eason made 2 threes tonight. If Tari Eason gets a bunch of open looks in game 7, I don't think they're going to go in at a super high clip. But like they need to do a better job of shrinking the floor. I would switch. I would switch without switching without conceding switches. What that means is like try to do what you did on the final possession of game 4. Bust through the switch as best you can, but ultimately don't give Fred VanVleet clean looks that come out of him slipping out of action because you put 2 on the ball. And I mean, there is something to be said about leaning into size. Like, I'm not even necessarily talking about Quentin Post necessarily, but just playing your bigger, better athletes as much as possible in the game for the purpose of trying to get more stops and get out in transition, because transition is another way they can get going. I would lean into it in different ways. Like I think with the starting group, I still really like having Buddy Hield out there next to Steph. But I think you need to have lineups that, especially when Steven Adams is on the floor, where you're built more around the athleticism piece and try to get out and transition more. All right, guys. So as we mentioned, there's a link in the description. We're headed over to playback right now. We're going to take some questions, have some of you guys come on stage if you want, and we will watch some of the film from the Warriors struggling against the Rockets zone. We'll see you guys over there in just a few minutes.